Look out the window. Stocks collapsed all over the world. Industries closed, nations closed down. Everything closed down. I don't remember a time like this in world history, when I've been alive anyway.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with the Miles Franklin Market Update. And with us today, a very special guest. He's known as a legendary investor. He's Jim Rogers. He's an investor, financial commentator. Jim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Elijah. I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. What I wanted to first ask you about, because you are such an investor, and we are in an unprecedented time of crisis and the pandemic, I wanted to ask you, how has COVID-19, the whole pandemic and everything, how has that impacted the investment world on your end?
Look out the window. Stocks collapsed all over the world. Industries closed, nations closed down. Everything closed down. I don't remember a time like this in world history, when I've been alive anyway. In my view, most countries overreacted and they shouldn't have closed down, but who cares what I think? They did it, and it's had huge impacts on everybody, and it is now. Now we have governments all over the world printing staggering amounts of money and borrowing and spending staggering amounts of money. I don't know how old you are, Elijah, but it is not good to be young in America in 2020. It's not good to be old in America in 2020 because of the debt that is building up. I don't know how anybody's ever going to deal with it.
That's a really good point you make with the debt, because we've seen, just from the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen trillions of stimulus from the government. So yeah, how is this all going to be paid? It doesn't seem like there's a solution to that.
There's not. That's why it's good to be old instead of young. But Japan, Elijah, in Japan, every day the head of the central bank goes to work early, cranks up the printing presses, prints. He says, his words, unlimited, that's his word, unlimited amounts of money. And he's buying ETFs and futures and indexes and stocks. It's staggering what's happening in Japan. Japan has huge debt and a population which is declining for 10 years. Declining for 10 years. It's terrible to be a kid in Japan in 2020. When that kid is 40 or 50, the people are going to be gone and the debt's going to be through the roof. I'm not saying America doesn't have it's maybe not just as bad because we don't have a declining population. But all over the world, this is leaving a huge burden on all economies and all populations.
Now, I know you've been talking about the debt for a long time, and you've talked about how the next crisis we're going to have is going to be worse because of the debt is going to be worse. Now, and I know you've obviously been positioning yourself and you're investing with respect to all of that. So how has, if at all, the pandemic maybe accelerated the transition we have to the next crisis, or how has it impacted investing for you?
Well, it impacts me the same way it impacts everybody else. My stocks go down when the markets go down, and sometimes I get it right and my stocks go up. At the moment, I am looking for things that have been beaten down a lot. I bought a Russian transportation company recently, Chinese wine companies. People stopped going to restaurants, stopped going to bars. I bought Japanese ETFs. The head of the Bank of Japan buys ETFs. Well, he's got more money than I do, Elijah. If he's buying ETFs, I want to buy Japanese ETFs too. So it has certainly affected me because it's affected the world economy and world markets. I didn't buy gold and silver after 2010, but last summer, 2019, I started buying gold and silver again. This, of course, just makes gold and silver more attractive because the more they print, the more gold and silver are going to do well down the road.
And we've seen that over the last 5-6 months. Silver has more than doubled. Gold has hit a new record nominal high. What is your take on what's happened in the gold and silver markets recently?
Both are going to go much higher. Silver's a better buy right now than gold because silver's 50% below its all-time high. Gold is near its all-time high. So on a historic basis anyway, silver is cheaper. But I'm buying both and will buy both when the opportunities arise. Both are going to become overpriced during all of this, and they may turn into a bubble. I mean, if things get really, really, really bad, throughout history, Elijah, when people lose confidence in governments and in money, they've always bought gold and silver. Now, the politicians will say, don't bother with gold. Academics will tell you, don't bother with gold and silver. That's absurd. Might be. Maybe they're right. But all of us peasants, I'm an old peasant, and all of us peasants know that when things go wrong, we want to have a little gold in our pocket. So I continue to buy gold and silver and will continue to because I'm an old peasant.
You talk about it being people saying it's absurd, and well, maybe it is, but it seems like we're seeing a lot of absurd things happening right now. And yeah, I mean, it just seems like, everything that's going on in the financial world, everything that's going on in the political world, it does seem like we're in a very strange spot.
Strange. It's never happened in history before. The U.S. is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. You could have said that 6 months ago too, and the debt has skyrocketed again. You could never have had ever in history the head of the Bank of Japan saying, I will print unlimited amounts of money. I mean, for a serious central banker to say that ever in history, he would have been laughed out of town. No, these things are absurd that are going on now. The risk for gold and silver, as far as I'm concerned, is they might turn into a bubble. Now, if they turn into a bubble, I'll have to sell because you have to sell bubbles because once they collapse, it takes years. First of all, they go down dramatically, and then it takes years for them to come back. And I don't want to sell my gold. I want my children to have my gold and silver someday. Everybody should own gold and silver as an insurance policy, if nothing else. So I don't want to have to sell my gold and silver. So I hope it doesn't turn into a bubble. But Elijah, you said it. There are very strange things happening in the world right now.
And one of the strange things that at least a lot of people think is strange, that amidst this economic crisis, we're seeing the stock market. If we look at the Dow, it's already almost near its all-time high. It was, within a couple hundred points. Now it's back down. But what do you make of that? Why is the Dow now rebounding so strongly?
Well, partially because it got bashed so much in the panic, but also because, as I said, they're printing and spending and borrowing huge amounts of money. The money's got to go somewhere, Elijah. And historically, the fastest and simplest place is into the financial markets. It's very easy to pick up the phone or go on the computer and buy yourself skillions of bonds or stocks. To build a factory takes a while. To sell products and get receivables and inventory takes a while. But you can go on the internet or on the computer in 30 seconds, put a lot of money to work.
Definitely. And now with all this money printing and all that going on and the economic crisis, where do you see things heading in the economy from here? Do you see the economic crisis getting worse? We go into a depression, or as some people want to see, at least for the short term, kind of a V-shaped recovery? What do you make of what's happening, and what, at least in the short term, do you think will happen?
Well, Elijah, there is a V shape, but hear me out. For instance, I live in Singapore. Well, the airport closed. Everything closed. Now they're having 50 flights a week or something. I mean, when you go from 0 to 50 flights, you think, oh boy, there's a big recovery going on. And then you go to 100 flights and 500 flights. And everybody says there's a recovery. And that is a recovery from nothing. Is it real? No, of course it's not real, but it's certainly a V-shaped recovery. How long will it last? Well, certainly, as you know, in America, we have an election in November. So the politicians are going to do everything they can to get reelected. It's not good for you and me, but that's their business, to get reelected. So you're going to see a lot of good things happening to help them get elected, and that may keep the markets up for a while. And like it's happening all over the world. As I'm not picking on the U.S. now, as I said, the Bank of Japan goes there and prints as much as he can every day. The English, oh my gosh, the English are basically, you've heard of MMT, more money today. They're practicing MMT. They're not announcing it, but they're just spending and printing money as fast as they can to spend more money.
One of the things I really wanted to touch on today is how the dollar's falling. And you've mentioned during times in crisis, people rush to the dollar as a safe haven. So why do you think in this crisis we're seeing the dollar falling? I know obviously the dollar isn't really a safe haven, at least maybe in our view, but people rush to it anyway. So in this crisis, why is the dollar falling?
Well, Elijah, if we were talking 3 months ago, you would have said, oh my gosh, the dollar is very, very strong. And it has been. And that's why it's falling. I mean, market's correct. That's normal. That's the way things work. Maybe it's the end of the dollar, but in my view, it's a normal correction after being very strong for a while. And the dollar is now coming down because of various and sundry things, including uncertainties about election or whatever. So I would suspect that later the dollar will start going up again. And once the turmoil gets really serious, whenever it does, later this year or next year, the dollar will get very strong. It'll become overpriced. It could even turn into a bubble. But I know, Elijah, we're getting close to the end of the dollar being the world's powerhouse. That's been going on for decades for many good reasons. But now, if Washington gets angry at you, they do something and they put sanctions on you. They make it impossible to use dollars, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now many people say, wait a minute, that's not fair. That's not what reserve currencies are supposed to be. They're supposed to be neutral and anybody can use them, including the devil, if he wants to. So now countries are starting to find or work on a competitor to the dollar. China, Russia, Iran, Brazil, countries are starting to, India are starting to say, well, we have to do something. We have to come up with a competing currency. And they're doing it for political reasons because they say it's not fair. But also for economic reasons, because I'm not the only person who knows the U.S. is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, and it's getting better, worse and worse and worse. And every time a country has done that in the past, it's led to problems. It used to be the British. Well, the British, very few people use the pound sterling anymore. Before that, it was other currencies. So it's already starting to happen. And the current situation is just accelerating that because the debt goes higher in the U.S. I mean, I repeat, I still expect the dollar to go higher and get overpriced because people will think of it as a safe haven for historic reasons. But you and at least I know it's the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, and I'm not the only person who knows that. I don't like saying it, Elijah. I'm an American just like you, but I have to face facts.
All right. Well, Jim Rogers, thank you so much for your time today. Before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers, where they can find you? Maybe if you have a book recommendation that you've, your favorite book you've written, or where can people learn more if they'd like to?
Miles, I'm afraid I don't have anything to sell. I have written some books, but I have, believe it or not, I've had 3 #1 bestsellers in Japan in the last 18 months, but the books are in Japanese. I can't even read them myself. I wrote them in English, and then they're all translated into Japanese. I have no idea what they say, but you can go buy my Japanese books if you want to. Anyway, it's been fun. Good luck. Let's do it again.
Definitely. Jim Rogers, thank you so much for your time. Hey, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Jim Rogers. We're actually going to have him on again soon, maybe in a month or two. And co-hosting with me is going to be Andy Schectman, the president of Miles Franklin. And we'd like you to be a part of this interview. So if you'd like to submit questions for the interview, then email me at elijah@milesfranklin.com. My email is right there. Once again, thank you so much for watching.